One of the most consequential and closely watched Senate races this time around is in Montana between Democrat Jon Tester and Republican U.S. Senate candidate Tim Sheehy. He is leading right now. He has been for some time, but he seems like he wants to make it more exciting right up in the weeks leading up to the election because he's throwing out some comments that I can't imagine a lot of people are going to love. He recently said that the U.S. should eliminate the Department of Education because it was, quote, turning children into slaves. Bear in mind, we were just talking on the show about how Republican-led state legislatures are trying to push for kids to start working in dangerous jobs for longer hours than ever before. But it's the books that will make you a slave, he said. Well, anyway, his questionable choice of language continues. He said, "We have a Department of Education, which I don't think we need anymore. It should go away. That'll save us $30 billion right there. We formed that department so little black girls could go to school down south and we could have integrated schooling. We don't need that anymore." Now I'm gonna assume what he's implying is we don't need that, the Department of Education, anymore, and not we don't need that integrated schooling anymore. I'm going to be nice to him and assume that's what he means. That said, what do you think the Republican Senate candidate around that time would have been advocating for when it comes to integrated schooling? I'll also remind everyone, schools are generally more segregated than they were several decades ago. So the idea that, oh, we fixed this a long time ago, there doesn't need to be any oversight is simply not true. But anyway, the plan to eliminate the Department of Education is not just something he's pushing for. It's also in Project 2025, by the way, calls for the total elimination of the Department of Education and other moves that would overhaul the federal government. And so, look, they could claim that it has to do with money. The issue is that don't make any sense. Montana gets $40 million from the Department of Education. That's just the money they get for students with disabilities alone. And it's 15% of the overall education budget. Again, Nina, like, what are we supposed to do with these people? Like, not only the questionable language about slavery and little black girls, and I don't need a guy that looks like that to be talking like that, but this like farcical idea of the state of segregation and integration. And again, in a race that he's currently leading, he's beating the incumbent, Jon Tester. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he needs to read a book or take a class. That's my first recommendation to him, thinking of the Department of Education. I just don't understand why the Democrats want to go riding so hard against the Department of Education. It is needed. That does not mean that there cannot be things done differently in any bureaucracy. We should be looking at these various departments and make sure that they are still up to mission, and it has the mission changed for the new century or the new technology, things like that. But to totally want to eradicate the Department of Education, John, I don't get it. I don't know why they are doing this. And as far as the little black girls and segregation and stuff, as you laid out, schools are more segregated now in the 21st century than they were in the 20th century. It is important to have that department beyond integration. It's bigger than the conversation about integration. It is also the money that you're talking about. A lot of these schools, kids from more wealthy or affluent communities, the per pupil cost is more, or what is spent on educating them is more, because most school systems rely on property taxes. So if children live in cities like Cleveland, Ohio is another one, where the poverty rate is extraordinarily high compared to a suburban community, then those kids who live in poorer areas, Cleveland or otherwise, they don't get the same per pupil funding. So we need the state to weigh in on this in terms of tax dollars. You know, it's the money that we're all putting into a pot to make the world a better place. And one way to do that is to invest in our children. And we need the federal government to play a larger role. This, to me, is on the side of the ledger of things that the federal government can do to make the lives of various communities across this country better by investing in our children. And maybe, John, the Republicans don't want that, so they're going after the Department of Education. Hell, they don't care if children work at 14 in chicken factories or beef factories. So why should they care whether or not they receive the education they deserve?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's a good question. Like, really, what do they? And again, bearing in mind that their own kids will always get an amazing education. They won't be going to schools that desperately need the oversight and funding of the Department of Education. They'll be very well funded by billionaire interests. But for the rest of us, again, They want us to be small, think small, know small, and accept whatever we're given. It is a very dark, like it is an image of just growing up, having a couple of years maybe of playing as a kid, and then you will be living and working in dark rooms with no windows, desperately hoping that your job isn't taken by a robot rolled out by Elon Musk or whatever. Like that, this is what they're pushing for. What would they care if the Department of Education didn't work? And again, there could be all sorts of, I think that there should be all sorts of education. I think that, you talk to a lot of teachers and you're starting with like No Child Left Behind, the push for more standardized testing. Like, there's a lot of issues. But the idea that the solution is to just blow it up entirely, I don't buy. And really fast, Jon Tester responded to this saying, "I'm a proud product of Montana's public schools and a former public school teacher, and I'll fight to protect them with all I've got." I like that. I don't always agree with Jon Tester, but I like that comment. It sort of fits in with Tim Walz. Like, these are people with actual experience in that world. Sheehy, by the way, he's the guy who had that drunk Native American rant. He apparently has this anecdote he tells when he's in certain groups of people about drunk Native Americans. They hired a staffer who promoted racist posts. I guess he was either going to work for Tim Sheehy or Tucker Carlson, I guess, and it went with Sheehy this time. And he was caught hurling slurs at opponent, including Jabba the Hutt. Don't put people like this in important positions of power. He should not be choosing our judges. He should not be voting on legislation. He's clearly not qualified.
Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.